I'm about to say something very controversial, but it needs to be said. Technology has unequivocally ruined the new car market. Everything from full digital gauge clusters to large infotainment systems, the lack of physical buttons and dials, haptic feedback buttons, and then maybe to a lesser extent, the emergence of the EV market, and then of course, autonomous technology. But those two things are a separate topic. I think what we have right in front of us for infotainment systems, digital gauge clusters, even interior quality and layout is more than enough to dive into today. Now, as you guys know, I have been featuring brand new vehicles for almost 8 years now. It started in late 2017. And there was always a sense of excitement, like, wow, what am I going to experience today? And what can I showcase to you guys where these vehicles are going to be awesome, they're cool, they're tech-focused, they're futuristic. Well, in 2025, I've now reached a point where I'm looking at these vehicles and thinking, wow, we are no longer progressing. We're no longer moving in the right direction. In fact, we're going in the opposite direction. Things are getting worse. And it's not just the technology, it's the interior quality. You can look at it, you can see that with the plastic materials on the dashboard, door panels, even just take a look at what you have for the technology. There's something missing. There's no substance there. Sure, you have manufacturers that are doing a great job, like Honda, like Toyota. I think Nissan's doing okay with the Android-based software. Maybe to a lesser extent Ford, and maybe you could throw in Volkswagen as well now that they're starting to right the ship a bit. But then you take a look at the luxury segments and you sit there and think, what the heck is going on? Why am I spending $80,000 or close to for an Audi Q5, SQ5, the A5, the Q6, and I'm getting a tech package that's worse than the B9.5 generation? I mean, what the heck was Audi thinking with the Google-based software? It's been ruined. The old MMI user interface was the right balance. Audi's virtual cockpit was amazing. Take a look at a new Q5 and a new A5 now, and you sit there and you think, oh my gosh, this is bad. This is not good tech at all. How did Audi go from something so great to something so bad? And it's not just Audi. I want to be fair to a lot of manufacturers. It's also BMW too. I look at older BMWs, like around 2020, 2021, where they started moving in the full digital gauge cluster direction. I think, wow, that's actually aging quite well, even though you had that horrible sun glare on the digital gauge cluster. But the iDrive 7, iDrive 8 user interfaces were fantastic, and the Google-based software, yes, is kind of taking away from some of all of that. But even for the mainstream markets, I'm looking at what you now have, and it's like, I don't even know if this is even user-friendly, if this even makes sense for its price point. Now, pricing is a huge factor into all of this, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video. Because the technology that you are now interacting with, the technology that you don't even like, nor do you even want, you're paying extra for that for every new generation. Where when you take a look at the new pricing, where you're spending $2,000, $3,000 more than last generation, yes, some of it has to do with inflation, but a lot of it is the technology. And I think we've now reached a point where that technology isn't useful, nor is it wanted. Whatever happened to the days of just buying a simple car with some technology sprinkled in? Because onboard navigation has been around for a long time. We've also had Apple CarPlay for a few years now. But even way back in the 2000s, you had vehicles with DVD players. It seemed like that was the right balance. Even 5 years ago, you could buy a car with analog gauges, a small information display in the center for your tire pressure monitoring system, your fuel economy statistics, maybe even a digital speedometer. Then your infotainment system, small, yes, but you had physical buttons and dials on both sides of that screen. Maybe you had Sirius XM, onboard navigation, Apple CarPlay, the necessities. Then beneath that, you would have physical buttons and dials for your dual zone climate control or single zone climate control and your heated seats. Now in 2025, you have onboard assistance thanks to Google-based software that controls all of that for you, by the way. You have full digital gauge clusters that really don't provide any more value than what you have right now for an older vehicle with an information display. It just looks cooler, it looks sleeker, it looks more futuristic. But in reality, these vehicles are no longer mechanical machines, they're computers. And this leads me to performance, which isn't as clear-cut, because I do think there are instances where technology has most certainly been beneficial, where you have cars like a Honda Civic Hybrid or a RAV4 Hybrid that is producing a lot of performance. I mean, the Civic Hybrid is faster than a Honda Civic Si, and I think it's actually one of the best cars you can buy in that market. A RAV4 Hybrid, a great value. It really is. It's efficient and enjoyable to drive. But what I'm really focusing on is the fact we have steer-by-wire, brake-by-wire. Cars no longer feel analog. They no longer feel raw. And technology has completely taken over that. And it's even more enhanced with EVs and plug-in hybrids. Now, I am driving a 6-year-old GTI, so this is not the most old school or raw car out there. It's not a Mark I, not a Mark II. Far from it, really. But when you take a look at what this car is offering compared to its successor, the Mark 8, Mark 8.5, I think it's safe to say the Mark 7 and 7.5 was the pinnacle for this particular nameplate. And I think the same can be said for a lot of cars right now, that their predecessors were better. And 10 years ago, that would not have been the case. You would always look at progression as being a good thing, right? The next generation was the better car. I look at the cars now in the 2020s and I'm like, they're just not that great. And it's not even just performance, it's design, it's interior styling, it's interior quality. What the heck happened? How do we go from good cars 10 years ago to this in 2025? That is something I will never understand. Then we get into EVs, which for one are soulless. Two, have no sound, no authentic sound that gives you any sense of connectivity to the car you're driving. And then three, they all drive the same. There's nothing different. And I feel like those attributes are actually making their way into gas-powered cars as well. There really isn't anything differentiating vehicles anymore, unless a manufacturer drops in a V6, a V8, a dual clutch. Everything now just feels bland, mundane, and the same. And I think a lot of that can also be experienced outside of automotive as well. We are not in a great time when it comes to cars, and I think we're now getting to a point where there is fatigue. Most consumers are getting fatigued, and it's not just the average consumer, it is now enthusiasts as well. The lack of manual transmissions, the lack of having a car that feels raw, these are all things that are stacking up with each passing year, and manufacturers are not addressing that. And that's one of the real problems here. Some manufacturers are becoming tone deaf. Sure, you will have Toyota, Honda, even Porsche making changes to their future plans where they're not going to go in a full EV direction, where Porsche is going to give us a new Macan or Macan replacement in 2027, which will likely be built on Audi's PPC platform, which also underpins the A5 and Q5, which I already have my reservations there, but we'll have to wait and see in a few years. But then you have brands like Ford, who wants to make a universal platform for EVs at scale, which would have been a great idea 5 years ago. Now in 2025, making EVs at scale for the US market might not be the best decision because a lot of Americans prefer gas-powered cars or hybrids, and also you have an administration that is removing a lot of the restrictions that manufacturers have when it comes to emissions. Now also with Ford, and I'm learning this now on the fly, is that they're dropping the Ford Escape in 2027 to make this EV pickup. So you lose an affordable crossover while also giving you an EV pickup that isn't guaranteed to sell. Because a lot of people in the comment sections want a gas-powered pickup truck between 20 and 30 grand. And they had that with the Maverick, now not so much thanks to the tariffs. So buyers are looking for affordable gas-powered vehicles they can use. They don't want EVs, they don't want the technology. In fact, Slate is kind of that nice middle ground. It's actually, I think, a perfect harmony and is exactly telling us where the automotive industry is going. It's a cheap EV, but so trimmed down where you don't have that large infotainment system. You don't have that large digital gauge cluster. And in fact, I know people who have put money down to get their allocation for one. And in fact, I kind of want to do the same because I want a cheap vehicle that isn't so tech focused, that isn't so futuristic. I want simplicity, and I think a lot of buyers are feeling the exact same way, and this is where we are now in 2025. I think we are at an inflection point, because you just take a look at where buyers are at right now. They want older stuff all of a sudden. The whole retro thing seems to be a huge trend now, and are manufacturers ready to hop on board, or are they still going to give you full tech experiences that a lot of you don't really want? That's going to be a huge question. And this brings me back to the pricing of all of this. Because if a $30,000 EV is possible without federal tax credits, then Ford can most certainly make a fun vehicle between $20,000 and $30,000. But it comes down to wanting to do it rather than can or can't, because I think a lot of manufacturers have figured that, well, people want technology. They want full digital gauge clusters. Yes, safety regulations have also created a bit of an issue when it comes to pricing. But I do think there's a number of buyers out there that are looking for basic and simple transportation. Slate proves that. People are looking for that. They don't want large screens. They don't want full digital gauge clusters. I think a lot of buyers want Apple CarPlay, they want smartphone connectivity, but to get to that point, they have to sift through a lot of stuff that they don't want. And because of that, they're spending a lot more money than they really have to for a brand new vehicle in the 2020s. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick video. Very different than what I normally do, but I couldn't resist. I can't stay silent anymore. Let me know in the comment section below what you think though. Is technology becoming very unnecessary? Have we gone too far? I'm not talking about autonomous tech. I'm not talking about lane centering and all those safety systems. I'm talking about what you have in front of you with that digital gauge cluster, with that infotainment system, because I think a lot of you are going to agree that we don't need all of this in our vehicles that we drive every single day. But guys, once again, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.